Today, I'm going to be sharing with you 4 exercises to strengthen those hip flexor muscles. Hip flexor strengthening is initially not what I usually start with to resolve lower back issues or performance issues, but it is something to work towards once we have built a strong foundation of core strength and posterior strength. So once we have done the work to build a strong core and strong glutes, and we know how to keep our spine stable and maintain that, then we can totally start adding some hip flexor strengthening. If we just skip core strength, glute strength, and we just start working on our hip flexors that may already be tight, then we may start to feel that lower back tension again. We may start compensating. And part of these exercises I want to share with you today are some major mistakes that I want you to avoid once you start to get those hip flexor work in. So you can follow these exercises with me as I show them here to try them out. Another thing you can do is you can incorporate a couple of them with your hip exercise. So if you're doing some glute exercises, maybe you can finish off with some exercise for the hip flexors. So the first exercise, I want you to grab a resistance band and put it around your thighs. So make sure that your hips are level and you're not dropping or hiking your hips when you're doing these. So we're going to initiate the movement by first extending the hip a little bit and then flexing it up. Small extension and then up. Make sure you're not getting into that anterior pelvic tilt. You want to have a slight posterior pelvic tilt here. Just keep everything tight and avoid flaring your thoracic spine here. We don't want to be going back and forth like that. So make sure everything is nice and stable, your pelvis is stable, and then just put in that focus here. So it's almost like connecting your abdominals and doing a very small crunch, kind of like an oblique crunch to connect your hip flexors, and then it can keep this area here tight. And of course, adding that posterior tilt. So you're gonna switch sides. Sometimes it's nice to just place your hands around this area so you can feel those muscles working. And notice how my back is stable and the movement is coming from my hips. And take a break. I want to show you now a really good exercise you can try to work those hip flexors in a dynamic way. So you can either have the wall here for support, you can just support your back with your hands. You want to extend your legs, and what we're going to do is we're going to be going around this dumbbell, so lifting your leg to each way, out and in, and the primary muscles that will be doing this movement are your hip flexors and as well as your abdominals. But make sure that you're initiating that movement from your hips and keeping that back stable, so you're not rounding your back here. You should be feeling all these muscles working, including your quads. And if your hip flexors are really weak, you may get tired really soon, so it's okay to take a break and then you can do 4 and pause and then do 4 more. And now we're gonna do the other side. You may notice that one side feels stronger than the other, that could be due to like dominance. So this is a really good way to also assess like how your hip flexors are doing and which side feels stronger or weaker. So this exercise is an abdominal exercise, but we're going to be adding the band to get those hip flexors engaged. Usually when we're doing our ab work, we want to disengage the hip flexors so we can isolate and focus on those abs. But for this one, we actually do want those hip flexors to kick in. And this may also help you feel them so that the next time you want to just isolate your abdominals, you know how it feels to have those hip flexors engaged, so you can work on disengaging them. So we're gonna have our legs straight and we're gonna be lifting one leg at a time and pressing against the resistance of the band. When you're going up, remember to have that slight posterior tilt. So you don't want to be overarching your lower back and trying to flex your hips, because it's going to be tough and then you're going to immediately get you the lower back to do more work. So we want to have that posterior tilt, engaging the abdominals and using both your abdominals and the hip flexors to get that leg up. This is why it's really important, as I mentioned earlier, to build that foundation of core strength and stability, because without it, we're just gonna be overworking the hip flexors and it can cause more pain later if you have some lower back issues. So I wanna share now kind of an integration exercise, which is the lunge to leg lift. So we are gonna be working both the glutes and the hip flexors and getting that core engaged too whenever we're lifting up. Again, remember that posterior tilt and trying to connect your hip flexor with this side, your rib cage or your obliques here, to just feel that connection there, because that would really help you from overarching your thoracic spine and your lower back. So keep that in mind as you do these exercises. There's a lot of work being done by this glute here to stabilize the pelvis as we do this, but you're definitely working the hip flexor on this side, and that 1 second pause is really good for building that time under tension and really working those hip flexors. Remember to connect the hip flexors with the obliques of the other side. Just make that connection and focus on that posterior tilt, just not too much that you're rounding your back, but just tilting your lower back just a little bit. I'm gonna switch sides. When you do these exercises, make sure to keep those hips at the same level. There shouldn't be any hip drops or any hip hikes as you're doing this. You want to keep those hips at the same level as you lift up and go back down. So when you're done, you can do some very gentle hip flexor stretches to cool down. Make sure to also Stretch out your hamstrings. It's all about how you do these exercises. For me, I had a long history of lower back pain, so doing these exercises back then would have been really impossible, and it would have triggered so much pain and spasms. That's why I really emphasize on the importance of core strength and glute strength to help you add this extra layer of hip strength that you can work on your hip flexors safely. So there are so many videos that I have on this channel that will help you build that core strength, so I will link them below. If you haven't worked on that first, definitely do that. And I hope that these exercises were helpful. Definitely incorporate them. Try 1 and 2 and see how it feels. And if you have any questions, comment below and let me know.